Okay, now this next item 13 is to receive the points, that what happened in the 92 days before I rocked up.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
It's being moved by Councillor Walker and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Well, and so I'll put this after we've got a couple of slides here to wake us all up, which is jolly good.
Happy to take it as read, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor.
I want the presentation. Yeah, just a quick one. I want to see this. I've found this very interesting. In the previous short period of time before I got here, we increased debt by $371 million in 91 days, which is pretty good. What's it come to? Let me just have a look. It's $4 million a day. I remember being told off by the press when I suggested that the council were running up more than $3 million a day in debt. And it turned out it was 4. There's something to record there.
Mr. Wilson's got that.
Your Worship, can I suggest a compromise and maybe Karuna takes us through a few key points?
Okay.
Excellent, a few key points, very good.
So just the really high-level financial results and key deliverables for the quarter for both group and the AC parent. And if I can just talk through some of the key performance highlights. In terms of our service performance, we there were 24 performance measures, and out of them we met 15 of them, 13 of them, and so we're doing really well. Customer satisfaction and regulatory services were met, stormwater services continue to do well, and we are doing quite well in some of the premises that we're visiting in the high-risk alcohol premises. Of the 6 of the 11 that didn't meet target, they relate to our community facilities and services as they're still recovering from the impacts of COVID-19. However, these are higher than last year and showing signs of recovery, and they're actually expected to increase given the removal of library fines and customer acquisition initiatives. And if I could just pass to Ross to give the group high-level financial results. Ross, over to you.
Just very quickly. So in the September quarter, as the Mayor said, debt increased by $371 million, and that was to fund the capital program, and $543 million of capex was delivered over that period, a bit less than planned because there was issues with supply chain issues, labour shortages, and lots of sickness, COVID, and other winter flus coming along. On the operating picture, revenue and expenditure were just both slightly above budget, so it kind of nets out on a net basis. It included some central government funding that came in and went out as grants. If you exclude that, things are basically bang on budgets. That is the picture for the quarter to September. We're facing different economic conditions going forward, so probably what is more relevant rather than looking backwards is how do some of the trends look going forward, and we'll give monthly updates to the governing body going forward. John, just briefly touch on the debt.
Slide.
Skipping the slides.
I was skipping the slides. It's probably a bit hard to talk to without a picture, to be fair. Yeah, can we put it up on screen? If we can't put it up on screen, I can't really talk to it. I can see it, but no one else can. Okay, so what this is showing you is our level of interest rate fixed cover. So briefly explain this chart. So the top blue line is our forecast debt. The red dotted line at the top is our maximum fixed rate cover that we can have under our Treasury policy, and the bottom red dotted line or dashed line is the minimum fixed rate cover we can have under our Treasury policy. The actual there is shown by the dark blue segment there, and the light blue represents our floating component. So that dark blue area there, so that's our fixed rate cover. That's the stuff we put in place either through issuing fixed rate debt or having floating rate debt and converting it to fixed rate debt through interest rate hedges, or what we also call interest rate swaps or interest rate derivatives. Now the point there that you can see is over the next 3 or 4 years, we have roughly $10 billion of fixed rate debt, so pretty well covered, compared to a debt level growing from about 11 billion to 13 billion. The other point here is has been outlined in the mayoral proposal. If we do implement asset sales and manage to reduce debt, you're taking off that top 2 billion there. So really part of that blue portion there, which given the current rising interest rate environment is going to be your most expensive portion of debt. I will just briefly also mention our self-insurance fund for those councillors who are new. Now that's for the first time being reported in your reporting pack that you'll see on page 10. And for those who are familiar with insurance, a self-insurance fund is economically the same as a captive, except it doesn't have the administrative overheads. And the reason for a self-insurance fund at council is to make use of our size and scale of our balance sheet, limit our insurance coverage to the external market, so essentially keep premiums as low as possible, and we keep that expected portion of profit that insurers would otherwise get. And it gives us more flexibility in the insurance market, so when insurance premiums are cheap, we'll use more of the external market, and when insurance premiums are deemed expensive, we'll retain more ourselves. The self-insurance fund was capitalised back in October to $20 million, and we carry a maximum of $10 million of cover on any policy. From your next report you'll see for the December quarter, so you'll get that in February, that'll start to show the investment gains or losses. And I would say you need to take a very long-term view of a self-insurance fund. You're going to see fluctuations both in underwriting and investment performance month on month, but over time you should see that fund grow and enable council to take on more risk and manage its insurance coverage more strategically. I'll just pass over to Andrew.
Drop the slide there, do you?
Just hold that last slide there if you don't mind. The one with the that one there. That's something that's worthwhile adding to the consultation program, because that clearly shows that if we sell the airport shares, it's the expensive debt that we're saving, not the cheap debt. And so you get your maximum value out of it now, because that area is not fixed. And so I think might take a bit of explaining to people, but that's pretty valuable, really. You can work that out. Sorry, carry on.
So Ross talked to the group results. This is just a very brief synopsis of Parent. So it's a pretty good news story, although the results, as was pointed out, are back to September, so they're getting a bit stale. So on the top line, we had 3 million net higher revenue. That was in a period when consenting volumes were starting to come off a little bit, but they were more than compensated for by higher rental returns on some of the council properties and higher leisure centre patronage. And we had a one-off injection of money from central government for some wetlands restoration. So slightly above budget on revenue. Direct expenditure, that lower than budget spend was mainly in the maintenance area, again on properties, largely timing on the big town hall, Auckland House and the Henderson Service Centre. A little bit lower also on employee benefits, because we're holding as many vacancies as we can for obvious reasons, and that's helping our P&L. In terms of capital, Capital expenditure down somewhat, but again, mainly timing. Healthy Waters are taking a little while to get their small capital works program at full steam. They've got a new procurement process which is more efficient, and they're just bedding that in, but that will come right very, very soon. DPO, the big Picton Street project, encountered some unexpected issues with the road that they were digging up. There was a path under it that had to be investigated for heritage reasons. So they're coming through that, and that project's getting back on track. And we also had slower local park land purchases from a timing perspective, just slower to negotiate and settle those. So pretty good picture all round. Timing differences in some areas, but tracking well in the first quarter. Any questions on any of that?
Councillor Williamson. William Morrison. Lawrence Williamson,
You can
I'm sorry.
call me anything you like, just don't call me late for breakfast. Okay, so can we go back to the graph? I'm really quite keen to get a little bit more feeling for that. You've got that graph starting in 22 at about 11 billion of debt. Looks to be sort of halfway between the 10 and the 12. And the max fixed limit looks to be that same number. Is that right?
Yeah, through you, Chair, for the first year or two, it's the same number, so the maximum
It's the
is
same number for
100%.
the first sort of 2 years or so. And so, in other words, we could have fixed all of the 11 debt.
Through you, Chair, we could have fixed all of it, or we could have fixed about 6 billion.
Right, and right down to 6. But we were told in a number of the workshops that we'd fixed about 80% of the debt. Right? But that dark blue isn't 80% of the debt there. It's more like 95% if you measure it out. There's only a fraction little gap between the dark blue and the 11. So
Yeah. I think, you, Chair, what we're doing over the next couple of years, if you look, roughly we're at about 80 to 85% hedged, give or take.
yeah, but the briefing we had was right now we're about 80% hedged. That's what we were told. Yeah. Okay, and if I look at that dark blue is way up past the 90%. Am I misreading that?
No, through you, Chair, you're not misreading it. The one little thing I would add here is that this includes all the group debt, except actually the port, who currently run their own treasury. So there'll be a little bit of a difference.
I'll take this offline, but I'd really like to understand that graph a lot better than I do, because I think that's got some misleading numbers.
Good point. Thank you very much, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just from my education, being a newbie, in local board land, when we got the quarterly report, it came with all our worksheets, spreadsheets of all the work items, completed, not completed, how it was running, actuals compared to compared to budget. Am I missed an attachment here?
Through the chair, we do provide project reporting at a regional level on our key projects. However, if you do need more detail, we can work through you to get the detail that you'd like. So it's in line with the local board reports.
So the local board reports get more information, more granular, to use Councillor Williamson's, more granular information on us.
So through you, Chair, answer that. I mean, your governor said looking after the whole council, so you're not going to have individual bits of detail on every single thing going on.
I thought I'd gone up the ladder, bulk fund the boards, Mr Chair, and shut us down. Thank you. I do want all that information, please. Anyway, I'll email you. Thank you.
Councillor Darby, and I've got...
Thanks, Mayor. John, just on that slide there, Watercare at the end of June were carrying just a fraction under 2.6 billion in debt. With the implementation of the three waters, I think you've got Healthy Waters. There's questions as to how much debt gets transferred there. Maybe it's 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, I don't know. But just when that debt is transferred, because it will be transferred along with the assets, I'm presuming, how does it get transferred? Does it get transferred? I mean, you can't just go and offload, here's our expensive debt, Three Waters, please take that. That's not going to gel. How does that transfer, and when do we get an understanding of the implications of that transfer?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Look, that's a very good question, and one we're trying to work through with officials at the moment. So the first thing about the debt is it can't be novated to them, because our debt investors have invested in Auckland Council as a credit, not some water entity A. So in reality, and I'll use your number of 4 billion, give or take, so it'll be around the number. So water entity A will have to pay council for that debt, and it'll still be our ultimate obligation. Now for us, obviously, if this goes ahead at 1 July 2024, there's not much point us having $4 billion in one day. So what we're proposing is that debt repayment will be spread over, say, 5 or 6 years, or a time period to be determined, and they would be paying us interest based on our cost of interest in those time periods, plus a margin to reflect that we'd in fact be taking credit risk on that new entity. But those details are still being discussed with Wellington at a number of levels.
Okay, Mayor, that's probably something we need to get our heads around, you know, through the next series of budget discussions, not that it affects the annual budget.
I've got Wayne Walker next, but while you're paying attention, this local government funding authority, is that a large proportion of where we get our debt from?
Yes, so the LGFA, we at the moment have about 28%, give or take, of our debt raised through the LGFA, but we are capped at 40% of their issuance. Otherwise, LGFA has too much credit exposure on Auckland Council.
A question here from the chairperson of that, who said, I hope I've been briefed on the gap between CapEx on infrastructure renewals and that required to equate to the annual depreciation charge. It's an issue being commented by the OAG in December 20 report. Now, does that mean anything to you?
It doesn't mean anything to me, no. Can you just maybe repeat that again?
The gap between CapEx on infrastructure renewals and that required to equate to the annual depreciation charge.
Oh, yeah. So that's referring to the fully funding of depreciation?
Yeah.
Which
we're working towards.
We're working towards, and it's going to come in by 2028.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay, I'm just double checking, but when somebody like that sends me a comment. Righto, Mr. Walker, please.
So, just addressing that graph, quite obviously that's a graph that's showing us where our debt position is at relative to whether we've got cover or not.
No, through you, Chair, that is showing you what cover we've got. That's not showing you our debt position apart from the top line there, which is the overall debt level.
It's showing us our projected debt going out, right?
The top line is?
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. Quite obviously, there's a related graph that it would be very useful for us to have, which is the impact of that, both real and potential. And the impact is around the interest that we're paying. So I would suggest it would be highly useful for us to have another graph that shows the impact of that. And then further to that, conceivably another graph that might portray what we might be able to do about it. Because in an instance where we haven't got cover and we haven't got hedging, then quite obviously it's desirable for us to do that. I'm assuming that in addition, we, that is the financial part of council, do modelling, looking at what the base rates that are going up and what the Fed is doing in the US, because that's driving things, so that we've got some real projections going forward that impact on our financial costs. If we put all of those graphs together, we've then got a framework for decision making. and a better framework for governance, which is what I'm pleading for. So I just put that to you, Mr. Mayor. It would be useful for us to have it, because my experience is that we have not had this sort of information. We have not had any investment strategy. This council doesn't have one, and we really need that sort of information. Thank you.
I think that's going to go on the agenda from the gentleman to your right.
Yeah, just through you, Chair, that information on page 6 of the pack you get shows our forecast gross cost of borrowing going out to the end of the long-term plan. So what that encompasses is the blue part you see there, which is locked in at fixed rates, and then the light blue portion there, which is floating rates, and they'll be updated based on forward projections at the time. So what the yield curve is telling us about what we expect interest rates to be in those periods.
Another interesting part of that is that the forward fixed rate is a lot higher than the current fixed rate. So that doesn't show that, and which is a nuance which is missing there. But and so I think that we're getting into something or other which is really, I've asked Councillor Williamson to put on the next agenda for his committee. So prepare yourself to rock up there, but Mr. Williamson has a final say on this one. Then I'll go to Mr. Watson.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, those higher future forward rates are baked into our forecast, which you see on page 6. We're not using the current floating rates.
You said, I thought, with that dotted max fixed and min fixed, that was policy. So somebody before I got here put a policy through that was an absolute number or a percentage. Because you've got your debt going up to sort of 15 or so. I don't actually ever believe it'll ever plateau like that and flat, but let's just say it was true. Somehow you've got a 6 billion drop in what you can cover. Is that policy?
Yeah. Through you, Chair, yes, and I'll just explain, first of all, it flatlines after 10 years because that's in the long-term plan, right? So we have no numbers to go beyond
So it's a
that.
good reason.
So, no, just maybe hear me out here.
Okay.
The dotted red line on the top there is a percentage of the forecast debt, and that deliberately reduces as a percentage because the further you go out, the less certainty you have about what you're going to spend and how debt's going to come out when it comes to the actuals.
Wouldn't the policy be that you'd try to maximise as much as you could the fixed part of your debt?
Through you, Chair, if we were having this discussion 3 years ago when interest rates were about 1%,
I know.
we were being told, why on earth are you so fixed, why aren't you floating? What we're trying to do is give you a high degree of certainty about interest costs in the years, and especially years 1, 2, 3 and 4, and that's why you see a high level of that dark blue, which gives you certainty to plan and go and do the stuff which council needs, such as your capex and your opex.
You know, I'm not even talking about fixing it for sort of 20 or 30 years, but even like now with fixed mortgages and floating mortgages for homeowners, there's enough game playing. You can go in and fix quite a good chunk of it for a year or two and still not get caught by big shifts. But if that's a policy that you can't go above that limit on fixing your debt, that just seems... I mean, is that something variable that can be redone every 3 years or?
I think what we'll do is, in the interest of finishing today, we'll definitely shove that off onto your committee, because it's not that long ago that the fixing that we are praising Peter for was showing a very negative situation. And so there is risks with fixing both ways. But I think that's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, okay.
We'll all enjoy that at your next thing. It'll be worthwhile coming along. It won't be the usual dry tripe. It'll be something worthwhile. So I'm going to finish with John Watson, and then we're going to take a vote.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And it's just a question on that top line again of total projected debt, and not going out to 2037 or anything like it, but if I look at what's happened in the 10 or 12 years prior, so we know the legacy council's combined debt was about 3.9 billion, and we're up to say 11 billion by 2022. According to that projection, just say if we just go out for the next 10 years, our level of indebtedness will be tracking at less than half what it has been for the first 10 years. If it went from 3.9 to 11 or thereabouts in the first 10, give or take a year or two, then the next 10, it's only going up, say, another 3 billion.
What's the explanation for that?
So you Chair, there's a couple of reasons, and just remember this does exclude the ports of Auckland from this information. But what you find is that once we get to fully funding depreciation by 2028, your cash flows become a lot stronger, so that the amount of cash you generate from your business, and that means to fund our CapEx program, we're a lot less reliant on debt than we are currently and have been over the last few years. So fully funding depreciation substantially improves our debt position and our debt ratios.
Okay, just finally to kill that off is that those sorts of graphs are very useful, but they're more useful if they start several years before today, so you can see where we've been. So make use of graphs like that, show up at this thing, and debt graphs are always best to be plus or minus 10 years as well, because you can see where we've been, what the trends are. It reminds us that the moment where people think it's an aberration going back to 7% mortgages, that's normal services resuming. The aberration was the last few years of cheap mortgages. So, okay, I'm going now to put the vote to accept that. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary?
Aye.
Thank you. It's very entertaining. Hopefully we're heading towards the end of the entertainment. Next one is set up the advisory panels. This is to put them in place.